sensitive manner to our diverse student population by supporting the recommendation of the review committee. We have a long history in the district of supporting efforts to teach critical thinking skills and innovative curriculum to our students. As one of my former social studies colleagues, Tom Howe, used to say, the classroom should be a marketplace of ideas. Teachers should be allowed to exercise their professional judgment in choosing instructional materials educationally suitable for all students. I do believe that some materials are not suitable for some students and support local control with parental involvement to set standards for books and materials used in a school district. However, censoring a book does not help prepare students for life in the real world. The Office for Intellectual Freedom of the American Library Association highlights the Wisconsin State Journal article from March 16th about this issue under their censorship section. I find it interesting that the story below it is titled, U.S. Sets New Record for Censoring, Withholding Government Files. In these politically charged times, we should be doing all that we can to have thoughtful and complex discussions instead of censoring content. The classroom is an appropriate place for students to explore a wide range of opinions and historical perspective on difficult topics that continue to have relevance today. Censoring books does not help prepare students for the world we all live in, nor does it help build understanding. The support of teacher professionalism related to curricular issues by administration and board members is one of the reasons that I chose this district over others 17 years ago. I have stayed here because of that commitment, despite offers from districts with substantially more compensation. This culture has allowed me to collaborate with colleagues and members of the community on new courses and projects throughout my career. Voting tonight to censor content would certainly make teachers in this district less willing to take academic risk in producing curriculum and how they approach sensitive topics in the classroom in the future, as it would set a dangerous precedent. I believe that teachers in the English department have worked collaboratively to produce what they view as the best possible content to meet the course themes and learning objectives and district goals. I trust my colleagues and I hope that you show that you do so as well. A decision to censor content would certainly come across as questioning their professional judgment, which would be demoralizing to not only English teachers but also to teachers across the district. Your actions tonight will send a message to the teachers of this district. Please show your support of teachers tonight by casting a vote to support our professionalism and uphold the review committee's recommendation. Thank you.
Thanks. Next we've got Brian Frederick.
Brian Frederick. I do not reside in the district. I reside in Columbus. I teach 8th grade social studies at GDS, and I'm also co-president of the Monona Grove Education Association. To begin with, as co-president of the MGA, I would like to present the board with a petition signed by 135 teachers from across the district, asking the school board to uphold the decision of the review committee by not pulling To Kill a Mockingbird. We feel strongly that the school board should trust the professionalism of the educators they hire to make the curricular decisions for the students in their classrooms by supporting the decisions of the review committee. The petition should not be interpreted to mean that the MGA or any staff across our school district are discounting the concerns raised by parents dealing with the achievement gap or racism in our communities. In fact, it is the exact opposite. Teachers and all staff battle with these issues on a daily basis. We understand the district, like all communities, continues to struggle in these areas. As with any issue involving the learning of our students, we welcome open, constructive, problem-solving based dialogue. At this point, I'm going to take off my MGA co-president hat and speak to you as an individual person. These are only my views. I'm going to speak to you as a white male, a person who was once the ignorant, angry bigot, an educator who teaches early American history through the Civil War, who has dedicated all 28 years of his teaching career to combat racism, sexism, and bigotry in all forms. You can speak to my current students, any former student, any adult that has been in my classroom. You can come down to my classroom and take a walk and look at the walls, and you will see that this is true. It is my greatest hope that we as a community can use our current conflict to collectively organize, to continue and in some cases restart our conversations and direct investigations into the causes of our achievement gap and the underlying racial issues in our community. As one historian put it, race is America's hidden obsession. The issues we're facing can be found in every community in this country. Let us be the community that does what so many are afraid to do. Let's be the community that comes together and has the difficult, heart-wrenching conversations that help us to create the changes in our community and our schools that we all try to make a reality. Let us not be like so many other communities and paint ourselves into corners, distance ourselves, waste our time on accusations and planning for the next meeting to prove someone else wrong. Let's be the example our children so desperately need. Let's actually prove that a community can close their achievement gap and address racial issues. This will be hard. It will require time, money, and openness to change our current ideas about schedules, how we allocate funds, use of school staff, and so on. This will require resources and organizations outside of our school system. This will not happen because of lawsuits that will waste countless hours and finite money resources. This will not happen because we form a committee that reports back to the school board once every other month. This will not happen because we make a few curricular changes, pull a book, send some teachers to a conference. Pardon my arrogance, but this is our opportunity. This room is supposedly full of people who all want the same outcome. The first step is the easiest one. All we have to do is come together. Thank you.
Next we have Daniella Main.
Hello, I'm Daniella Main. I live on 203 Weston Avenue in Monona. I would just like to start by saying that teachers have been under attack for a long time, not just in this district, but across this country, and mistrust is growing for our educators, and my trust will always lie with the teachers. I am an MG alumni, and these teachers have influenced my life and made me a better person, so I don't think it's too outlandish to respect their judgment. These teachers have integrity, heart, and sensitivity. Wags, who isn't here tonight, she was like a mother to me, and I've cried in front of her. Wallace offered me immeasurable guidance throughout my school career and during the stress of my own ostracization. So I can also vouch for the social justice lessons that were in Mr. Frederick's class, and when, for example, we stopped our curriculum to discuss how Malala Yousafzai was shot by the Taliban for not going to school. Again, I trust the judgment of these teachers who, as an English student, I got to know very well. And I know how hard it is for the teachers who work on this curriculum. And accommodations and changes are going to put a lot of stress on these teachers who are already struggling with growing class sizes and shrinking resources. I mean, when I was a freshman, I remember, actually, this was my favorite book freshman year because of its depth and value and because that we got to have these difficult discussions in class. And resolving difficult issues with censorship, that's actually not going to resolve them. Reasonably, no one should feel stress having these discussions in the classroom with these teachers because it is the safest place for these discussions. And I actually, having been in this class, remember how heart-wrenching, confusing, scary, necessary, and freeing talking about books like To Kill a Mockingbird and Huckleberry Finn were. If the 9th graders are grown enough to experience this racism and perpetuate it, they are old enough to confront it in the classroom with a qualified and sensitive professional. If you think you can be a better judge for what belongs in the classroom, then be a teacher. I believe in the discretion of the teachers who decide what is and isn't appropriate. And I think the real issue is that the school and the administration are not doing enough to combat racism in itself. I think that the books are not the problem and never will be. The actual book is against racism. The actual lessons that we learned about from the book were saying, this is how Harper Lee shows that racism is wrong and how what she witnessed in her childhood is wrong. And for example, in my junior year, the planning committee decided to make our prom theme Oriental, and I was the one who got in trouble for pointing out that that was racist. And one of the speakers at my senior night asked if 2 of the Asian students who were on stage were related. So I have heard racism rampant throughout this school, and I can tell you that the white kids calling black kids the N-words are not the ones who are reading the books, okay? I mean, to be frank, just look at who's on the board. How many black teachers do we have at school? These are the problems that create racism throughout this district. It is not the books. And there was a lot of discrimination when I was going through this school, and I can tell you that it never came from my teachers. And in fact, the teachers were pretty much the only people in the higher up school who were helping to combat it. And just a quick quotation to finish from Ray Bradbury's Fahrenheit 451. Imagine, to make a woman stay in a burning house, there must be something there. You don't stay for nothing. You don't stay with these books for nothing, no matter how controversial they are. Thank you.
Next we have Keisha Peters.
Hi, Keisha Peters. 500 Galway Terrace, Cottage Grove, 52527. I'm not gonna do my talk on what I wrote, so first of all, I never realized when we were doing this that we were gonna have this teachers against us kind of thing, because that was never my intention, and I don't think that that was ever the initial intention. My children have all been in the school. My middle son, Sean Peters, had all these teachers that have spoken. They speak very highly of them, and it's not the teachers themselves that are the issue, but I can say that my son, Sean Peters, who I can honestly say with confidence that every one of these teachers have the utmost respect for my son, that he felt awkward and he felt uncomfortable reading that book and other books in later on in the years that repeatedly used the N-word. And typically, he was often the only kid in that classroom who was African American. We have 3 sons who've all been going through the district. We have a 30-year-old who graduated. He encountered racism in the school district. And then somebody had mentioned that, you know, I got made fun of for being Polish or whatever. Yes, all kids get made fun of, but our kids get made fun of for their hair or their clothes or whatever, and for being African American. So they get the normal bullying or the normal being made fun of, and then also singled out. So the 30-year-old went through the district, had racial issues. The 19-year-old, almost 20-year-old went through the district, had racial issues. And now our youngest started having racial issues in 2nd grade. And I'm just gonna tell the story real quick. In 2nd grade, there was a little girl that was picking on, actually he was in 4th grade, I'm sorry, 4th grade. There was a little girl in 2nd grade that were picking on him and all of his friends. And she happened to be a little African American girl who was picking on them. And our son came home one day and he said, "Mom, black girls are mean. In fact, black people are mean." And I'm like, "What do you mean? What are you talking about?" And he's like, "Well, that's what everybody's saying." And I just was like, whoa. If my son, who is exposed to us educating him and talking to him, to a father, a strong African American male in the home, who is a good role model, he has family, and we are integrated with positive role models. If he is getting this impression, what are these other little white kids running around thinking? And they're sitting there talking about that. We have a huge problem in this area, and I'm not saying the teachers aren't making proper judgments, but if they would listen to the African American voices, because they're not African American and they don't know what the feeling is and what it's like. Just like a man doesn't know what it's like to walk in a woman's shoes, a white person does not know what it's like to walk in black women's shoes. Thank you.
Thank you. Next we have Mike Mickelson.
Mike Mickelson, 764A St. James, Cottage Grove. I'm here tonight because I've never been to a book banning, but that's what you're deciding tonight. All the nice words aside, you are deciding tonight whether or not to ban a book. And there are legitimate points on both sides. When I initially started monitoring this situation, I was hard into the position of don't do it. I will tell you from my experience with this school district and the curriculum process, there are serious points that are being raised here tonight. You have a district where you have high quality staff, and they know it, but they do not accept input from families and parents when they have concerns about the curriculum. That's not picking on them. I am saying, as someone who has challenged the new social study curriculum, I've gone through the meetings with the teachers, I've gone through the meetings with Dr. Burrows, very nice meetings, but it is very clear they have no interest in listening. That's a problem. Now, that doesn't mean because there's that disconnect. If you're going to get into deciding tonight that we're going to ban curriculum because one group or another group has issues, and there are legitimate issues here, as someone who comes from a traditional family, who's a Roman Catholic, who's a conservative, and who's a Republican in this community, I meet a lot of minority statuses in this community as well. My family has faced a lot. My son has been bullied in this school district. Thank God a teacher notified us of that because the principal didn't deal with it. We took it to the administrator and it was dealt with. That principal's no longer in this district. So I can tell you this district does have issues. I hear what these families are saying regarding the tone deafness in some regards. Not intentional, but clearly there is a lack of listening. If we are going to be a community schools, if you are going to ban this book tonight, I will be back within the next couple of weeks with a complaint of my own regarding the world affairs curriculum and social studies. An absolutely undocumented, unjustified by the standards curriculum that's new to our district this year. So if we're going to get into the business of doing that, there are other people, there are other families who have strong views that are going to be in here. Now, I do think there's a point to be made. My son is currently reading To Kill a Mockingbird in the class that he's in. He's a freshman boy. I don't believe this book is appropriate to be in the freshman curriculum. I can tell you that my son is not getting out of it what he should be. And part of that is he's a freshman boy. He has not yet developed that critical thinking skills that are necessary to fully comprehend what is being thrown at him at the end of the semester. As you know, I think as most teachers will tell you, the first semester is one thing, the second semester is another. You're rushing through a lot of material. There's a lot that's being lost. So I would ask you to consider possibly moving this book to the junior curriculum. Don't. And then one last point, what was interesting tonight in the news is you had the first story about our school district considering banning this book, followed by a story about Senator Lena Taylor, a black senator today, who stood at a press conference with 20 black leaders in Milwaukee and justified and defended her use of the words, many of the words that are in this book. It was quite a juxtaposition. And so again, if we're going to get into doing that, I hope then that you will also be ready to understand that there are other families in this community who also have. But I ask you, please don't ban this book.
Thank you. And lastly, we have Sean Peters. Oh, I'm sorry. You just wanted to register in favor of removing the book from the curriculum. It should be at the top, not at the bottom. Sorry. Read it before your name. All right. Thank you very much. Next item on the agenda is approval of the consent agenda. I'd like a motion for approval of the consent agenda as presented.
So moved.
So moved and
I'll second.
seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Recognition information? Pass those down.
Don't have anything to see.
Nothing? Correspondence and announcements? Nothing? Susan?
I just want to acknowledge that we've received information from Senator Mark Miller about safety grants, which I know the superintendent is going to speak about tonight, about a legislative reference committee that's being formed to study dyslexia, and I guess I was interested in whether or not, I haven't seen a board update, if anybody's responding to that, or if there's anybody in the district that's going to be applying for that committee. That's due Friday. Seems to me there's another thing, but the other thing that some legislators are trying to initiate is registering high school students to vote once they qualify, and trying to do that in a knowledgeable, concerted, positive manner, so that we can make that available to the students within the school. So I know we received information on that, and I just wanted to acknowledge that we've received that, and that there's some deadlines on some of those issues.
Thank you. Okay, in that case, let's just jump into it. The appeal of the instructional materials complaint. If I can comment for a moment, we took this up at our 2 meetings ago. A couple of motions were made and defeated. Those are in your board docs. Given the time that has elapsed, we don't have to. It's appropriate to bring those back. We don't need to reconsider those. Motions, either motion or a different motion, could be introduced as a new main motion procedurally, so we can just move ahead with that. However, that said, I'd like to have a little discussion before we bring in a motion so that we can see where we stand and work out some of the issues, and then we can have a motion, hopefully that, do this one motion that reflects the views of the board. So who would like to start? Eric.
Thank you. President of the board, if you could give me 3 minutes, I hear this statement, and I think it's important because I invested a lot of time in this decision. I certainly don't take it lightly. I'm not a reader. I don't remember if I read this or not. My guess is I probably didn't in 9th grade. So I read it twice before making this decision because it's not an easy decision to make, and there certainly are a lot of concerns. So this is the conclusion that I came to, and some thoughts to consider before we vote. W.E.B. Du Bois said the problem of the 20th century is the color line. That was in 1903. It's hard to imagine that 115 years later, in the 21st century, the same statements hold true. But the very fact that we are discussing this book shows that it does. Replacing To Kill a Mockingbird could be the right decision. And I thought it was the right decision towards the end of my campaign. But after reading the book, I'm still not sure. I think the review committee's decision was to keep the book in the curriculum, but review the curriculum in the future, and that's important. This could very well lead to Kill a Mockingbird being replaced at a later time. It's also important to consider that the policy states no challenge material may be removed solely because it presents ideas that may be unpopular or offensive to some. If we vote to remove To Kill a Mockingbird from the curriculum, then this district will never be able to turn back. It will strip teachers from doing the very job we hired them to do. I'm confident that the English department will take the review committee's recommendation of further consideration by the Monona Grove High School English department of To Kill a Mockingbird in the curriculum, context in which the book is taught, and possible equivalent options for use of the book very seriously. It's not my place to suggest alternative books, and we should leave that up to the teachers and the curriculum professionals of the district. If we replace To Kill a Mockingbird, then what's the next book that could be offensive to gay students, religious beliefs, or even students with disabilities? Octavia Butler's book, Kindred, which I'm only using as a comparison and not a recommendation, has degrading language about retarded people. And while that is difficult for me to imagine a person with a disability in the class to read, it would also deprive a student from an important learning opportunity and work of art. We need to consider all these challenges before we remove a book from the curriculum, and how the district can work together to be more culturally responsive and celebrate individual identities. And I'm going to end my statement with a quote from K. Anthony Appiah in his book, Color Conscious. In policing this imperialism of identity, an imperialism as visible in racial identities as anywhere else, it is crucial to remember always that we are not simply black or white or yellow or brown, gay or straight or bisexual, Jewish, Christian, Muslim, Buddhist, or Confucian, but that we are also brothers and sisters, parents and children, liberals, conservatives, and leftists, teachers and lawyers, automakers and gardeners, fans of the Padres or Bruins, or Packers and Bears here in Wisconsin, movie buffs, mystery readers, surfers, singers, poets, and pet lovers, students and teachers, friends and lovers. Racial identity can be the basis of resistance to racism, but even as we struggle against racism, and though we have made great progress, we have much, much further to go. Let us not let our racial identities subject us to new tyrannies. Thank you.
Andrew.
I had to do an independent investigation on the whole situation. Being new on the board, I had to collect a lot of information to come up with my decision that I would bring out. We here are supposed to strive for education excellence and equality. And I saw through my investigations disrespect, no respect on both sides. and there was no responsibility on both sides. And we're being taped, and people call, email me, why is this arguing? Isn't this about for the children? Also, I had to reach out to a lot of my former classmates from Indiana. And we talked about the book. I remember reading it in 8th grade. Coming from a black man, which I've been for 49 years. I've been a black man for 49 years, and I think you're really not getting a true black perspective. When we grew and we read it, it actually gave me motivation. And when I mean motivation is, here is a man who was not going to get justice at all in Alabama. And it also taught me that all white people are not bad. That there was a man that would lay his life and get out there and help someone. Now, did it use the N-word a lot? Oh, yes. But for a white woman in the 60s to write that, what was she called? An N-lover. To bring that out, although this is a fictional book, to bring that out at that time, I am surprised she was not lynched. But that book gave me motivation, and it inspired a lot of us growing up. They also told me that their kids are going to predominantly white schools now, and they read it in 9th grade, and it's required in their area. However, they told me, because you are in a different demographic, kids may be uncomfortable in the classroom having a white teacher, a lot of white students, and you're the only person of color. That makes them feel bad. Teachers need to understand that. You've got to have an understanding of that. We are in a different demographics. Now, going back to the disrespect and the responsibility of the board, the teachers, and the parents that are complaining. Trifecta here. You guys, as adults, need to put an olive branch, apologize, and start from scratch. I am really hurt to see that other kids out here in the district that has talked to me and said, yes, I feel uncomfortable reading the book around people, but the teachers tried to set boundaries. And yet we're attacking the teachers, the board, and then we're attacking the parents. It's all of this. And as Dr. Larkin said, we need healing. And it is our responsibility to heal. And don't forget the children, because they're watching this. And as younger as they are, their heads is like a sponge, soaking everything up that we do. The N-word is homegrown. It's easy to pick it up in social media. These kids are sleeping with one eye open because they get information. You know they do. They have their phones. One eye like this, doing like this all night, getting up, drinking Red Bull to get to school. Because they're tired. But all this information, we didn't have that growing up. And there is the age gap. We are up here, we can't go the old way. We have to try to keep up with what's going on today to see what these kids are about and what they can do. My decision, Mr. President, I can make my decision. I do not want to ban the book. However, I want it to be an option because there are minority writers today that have books that correlate with that book in the 60s. We should have a subcommittee of parents, the teachers, a couple of board members to fully wrap around this. We can be leaders of Wisconsin right now. Here's an opportunity to do it. Put your egos aside and get it done. When Quincy Jones made the song, We Are the World, he put out there on the studio, leave your egos behind. Because when it all boils down to it, it is about the children. The safety, the education of the children. That's why voters voted for me to come here. It wasn't because of my good looks. Because if it was, I am short votes. I couldn't hold up. But you have to understand that we have healing to do, and it starts with us. We need to apologize to each other. We need to put an olive branch somewhere, and we need to start from scratch. But right now, I would make it an optional read until we can find something else. Because like Eric said as well, there's other issues out here. I just learned about a pansexual, metrosexual, everything, there is so many groups out here. We have to start looking deeper and understanding, and that's the only way we can improve on everything, on every level. That's my case.
Susan?
I wasn't going to read this, but I think I will just because of some of the comments and just to sort of piggyback on some of your points, Andrew. Toni Morrison wrote an introduction to Huckleberry Finn, an Oxford edition of it that came out in the mid-90s. And she talks first about how she was uncomfortable when she read that book. But then she says, in the early 80s, I read Huckleberry Finn again, provoked, I believe, by demands to remove the novel from the libraries and required reading lists of public schools. These efforts were based, it seemed to me, on a narrow notion of how to handle the offense Mark Twain's use of the N-word would occasion for black students and the corrosive effect it would have on white ones. It struck me as a purist yet elementary kind of censorship designed to appease adults rather than educate children. Amputate the problem, band-aid the solution. A serious, comprehensive discussion of the term by an intelligent teacher certainly would have benefited my 8th grade class and would have spared all of us, a few blacks, many whites, mostly second-generation immigrant children, some grief. Name-calling is a plague of childhood and a learned activity ripe for discussion as soon as it surfaces. So that's her comment. Then I want to read mine too, and mine's kind of close to 3 minutes too. But I've also spent a lot of time on it. I read the book again, and I understand why it's a good 9th grade book. With good reason, Board Policy 2521 assigns the responsibility for the selection of instructional materials to our professionally trained staff. As our Director of Instruction has noted, the process of selection of materials includes examination of learning targets, engaging the level of difficulty, the level of interest, and academic success of their students with various texts as they make decisions about both core and supplementary books and other materials. Much thought based on professional training and creativity goes into the development of curriculum and materials, along with the constant work to improve both. For our high school English teachers, any selected core or anchor novel used in a given year is part of the entire scope and sequence of the 9-12 curriculum, and you heard a little bit about that earlier. Supplemented with various choice books and other materials. Finding books that have appropriate rigor, hold wide appeal, and that many 9th graders will actually read and even enjoy, and a lot of them do read this book, is not so easy. In the case of To Kill a Mockingbird, students' experience with this novel in 9th grade helps prepare them for more challenging works included in grades 11 and 12. The teaching of this novel has been updated, including discussion around the way characters are portrayed and the use of the N-word. Atticus, for example, flawed as he is, can be discussed as an early upstander or an ally. How might this role be different today? To borrow a quotation often attributed to Ben Franklin and included in the email we received, justice will not be served until those who are unaffected are as outraged as those who are. The rich discussion that is prompted during the teaching and learning around this book makes connections with current events and provides an opportunity to have difficult conversations about race in addition to the various literary elements. Clearly, we've heard examples, we do need to be on this. We do need to have these discussions in school. There's frequent disagreement about good literature, including some of the titles that have been proposed by some as possibly preferable alternatives. Some may work, while others may present new problems. I've heard one mentioned tonight, I could name a few others. The list of widely acclaimed books that have been challenged in schools and libraries is lengthy and contains some well-loved classics as well as some newer ones. The step down the slippery slope of dictating to our staff what books they may and may not use within their classrooms or how they use them, overruling their professional judgment, is a step I'm not willing to take. Board members do not have the expertise to function as the arbiter of appropriate instructional materials. We have only minimal knowledge of specific goals of a given course, and generally little or no knowledge of what will best engage and serve the needs of ninth grade readers whose life experiences and academic skills vary. If we start down this road, where else might it take us? We received a well-articulated explanation of how this book addresses the Common Core state standards and how it is integrated into our high school English curriculum. Our teachers have heard the concerns raised by some parents and community members. They deserve the same opportunity the review committee had to engage in similar study, reflection, and discussion in making their decisions about what materials will best address their teaching goals, motivate and inspire young readers, and facilitate the learning of their students. They may decide to keep To Kill a Mockingbird as a required book and consider how well they establish the setting, how best to address the related issues. They may pair it with another novel that includes a more authentic black character with greater agency. They might even pair it with a nonfiction book. They could use Coates Between the World and Me, written for his son, which is a challenging book to read with a literary style, so I'm not sure all ninth graders could handle it. I'd have to leave that to the teachers. Or they may at some point decide to use a different anchor book and make To Kill a Mockingbird optional. I do have a concern about that because I do think it needs to be taught if it's read. Our job is to provide our professional educators with the time and resources they need, not to make the choices for them, and to encourage them to continue on with the study. Therefore, my vote will be to uphold the review committee with the directions that it gave for review and study.
Susan?
As I came home Monday night from the Justified Anger meeting that spoke how to be an ally, I once again challenged myself to be an ally to the students of this district, to reach out, to hear the voices of many, to have the courage to ask for support and help from many I might otherwise have lacked the courage to visit with on a truly significant racial issue. And I experienced many of the challenges of our students as they're confronted with learning in what may feel like a challenging and difficult environment as I tried to have these discussions in a challenging discussion environment. And I asked for help from a friend that has mentored me more than he knows. I asked for the help of a friend raised in a biracial family within this district. I asked for the help of a teacher who works with all types of students. I asked for the help of a mentor, coach, and advocate for our students and found his words, to no surprise, to be profoundly better than mine as I support the position of the committee in retaining, that's the language of the committee, to retain the book in the curriculum, not require it, to retain it. And strongly supporting, that's my position, the committee directive to the English department to, 1, carefully consider To Kill a Mockingbird's place in the curriculum. You need to read the whole recommendation. 2, the context in which it is taught other equivalent options or other ways to use the book that might include using a choice rather than as required text. So they didn't require it, they said consider it, and to support the professionalism of teachers and the need to involve teachers in instructional materials decisions. The committee further recommended that the English department carefully review its use of To Kill a Mockingbird by engaging in conversations, exactly what we've talked about here, that address some of these same issues discussed by the committee. Invite Jody Pope, an MG grad. Invite Gloria Ladson Billings, who has provided us with great education. Invite Michael Johnson, who brings people together in a way that nobody can clearly understand how he does that. And other African American leaders to join us in these conversations. And now, my rationale for this decision, in the words of my friend and mentor. This type of remember, biracial family, teacher, and coach. This type of situation is always a tough one, as I am very passionate about racial issues and how people are affected. But I do feel the decision to keep To Kill a Mockingbird in the curriculum is the right decision. Unfortunately, whether we like it or not, differences in racial viewpoints are always going to exist. Though sometimes tough and uncomfortable, I feel it is important to address these viewpoints every chance we get. Teaching opportunities used while reading To Kill a Mockingbird can be very beneficial for all students if done in an appropriate, thoughtful way. I feel that our teachers have grown over time and have a better understanding of how to teach these tough topics in a culturally respectful way. Yet they should continue to be provided opportunities to be trained on how to specifically teach these tough topics. Finally, I understand that families have serious and deep concerns about many things in school districts, but they ultimately should not necessarily dictate what changes be made. I feel that we, as school board members, administration, and teachers, are professionals that are constantly looking to improve our curriculum and environment in a variety of ways, and we do a great job of looking out for all students. So this is the conclusion of my rationale, and I know and I deeply trust that this Monona Grove High School teacher will do just that. A great job of looking out for all students.
You don't get to do that. Dean, do you have anything to say? He's not raising his hand, so I guess it's your turn, Jeff. Or do you have something to say, Dean?
Well, I don't think you've gotten away from a board meeting without it. But,
we did 2 weeks
well,
last time.
I was recovering from hip replacement surgery and missed the previous vote. The State Journal report somehow got around the state, and I heard from some of my graduate students from around the state that you don't know, I taught courses in politics and policy making and education at UW, and I always told them that there's going to be times when the rubber meets the road and you can't duck it. And what do you think those emails said to me? That there was a 3-3 vote and I didn't show. And, I was been following it. It's interesting because I was a teacher, and that was the same book right after it was published. And there was a group probably twice as large as in this room that objected to it at that time, mostly representing a perspective that the book had a stereotypic and unfavorable picture of Southern life. And so that's a difference in age and era and time and that sort of thing. I think that I've heard the reflection about our process and our teachers, and I know many of them. I've talked with some of them, and I could maybe make a separate judgment in some cases. I think we need to, as board members, we need not to take every issue and reverse decisions and so forth. I support the recommendation made by the committee to retain it in the curriculum. But I wish, but I'll add what I've heard here, particularly from Andrew, and I know Eric and some others have mentioned it. We need to address the issue. We need to address the broader issue of our gap. We need the broader issues of how we address these issues within our broader curriculum and school. I think I'm somewhat familiar with it. Some of the issues. One of my first experiences right out of graduate school was to explore the educational causes of the Watts riots in the early 60s for the California legislature. And as deputy state superintendent, I also was, one of my responsibilities was to work on the state superintendent developing a Milwaukee school commission. We didn't solve all the problems in any of those cases, but race and the issues surrounding race, and in all of its forms, whether it be found in a novel or be found on the street, we have to recognize we're in that environment. We're not immune to it because we're in a nice suburban community with a small minority that is not always apparent from day to day, but and I know the superintendent has had others on this board mention this, that I hope I mentioned to him that I think we lack a, for want of a better term at this point, a curriculum committee or something like that to take a look at that. And I know Eric has suggested a closing the gap type of thing, but I think we need some intensive outside consultation and help and that sort of thing to address a whole broad range of these issues, which I don't think are going to be solved by either by banning a book or approving it. So I'm going to support our professional staff on this and vote to retain it in our curriculum with not only the hope and the expectation that the administration, staff, and the board will come together and address a major ongoing initiative that will address the broader ranges of this and not simply one single novel. So that's where I'll be.
Okay.
If you want it.
All right. I guess I know. First, I'd like to say that I really believe that if we do decide to remove this tonight, which it's not a ban. I know some people have said it's a ban on both sides, but really, if we move it to recommended instead of required reading, at some point, any book you pick, you're leaving others behind. So at some point, that happens. I would also say that moving it to the optional reading list would probably be picked up by almost everybody next year. I know my son took a lot of interest in it once we started having these discussions. He wasn't too excited about it before. I also do not feel this is a slippery slope at all that we would be going down. We have discussed this over numerous meetings. We've had incredible feedback from people all over the community, and actually we've had sometimes not the best feedback from people throughout the country too. But that's really how decisions need to be made, right? But community coming together and deciding, making these tough decisions together. I'd also like to acknowledge that recommending to be removed does not reflect any respect at all on the teachers or the trust of the staff. I proudly send my kids to Monona Grove. Never had a problem with the teacher, never had a problem with any of that. I think my kids are getting a great education, and this book, notwithstanding, I don't think reflects them at all. My personal preference is that we recommend that this book eventually be moved to the optional list instead of the required reading list, but only with enough time and resources to do so. If that takes a year, 2 years, 3 years, whatever it takes to do it correctly, and to make sure that we give you resources to do so. As I said before, I've read the book. The book doesn't speak to me at all. I was kind of bored with it personally. But if I had read it in 9th grade as a kid growing up in an all-white area, it probably would have spoke to me. I probably would have really liked it. But now I think the world has moved on since that book has come, for the most part. I want to say, of all the things that were said tonight, Deb Trzynski-Becker said the one thing that really, really stuck out to me, that this Mockingbird isn't the cause of our problems, it's a reflection of the problems, okay? I understand that we have very much failed our kids of color. And it seems, and I understand why the parents of kids of color would think that, and it seems like we haven't done enough to even come close to addressing that. And it's a continual problem that doesn't seem to be a priority of our school district. I think that there are some people doing some great work within our school district, but I think overall, we haven't really addressed that. Hopefully we can address this tonight. Eric's had an idea, I threw an idea in there on how we can do committee work to really start to work on this. But right now we haven't. If you look at the board, I don't know that one thing we've done last year that has even come close to addressing the opportunity gap. So I think that we have a lot of work to do. I think we all know we have a lot of work to do. And I respect what Dr. Larkin said, that we all need to work together. There has to be a win-win situation here. And the best way to do that is we just sit down and treat each other with respect, and let's start moving the ball forward together. Because I think our kids need it. We can't tell our kids that they need to resolve things peacefully as we sit here and yell at each other. That just doesn't work to me. So I think I would recommend it. I'm fine if we don't. I think I understand both sides very well, I think, and so I would only recommend it with enough time, effort, and resources put into you guys to actually do it. So that's where I stand. Did you hear that?
This is easy.
Yeah.
There's a reason we have elected school boards rather than just professionally run organizations. That's because we're here to reflect the values of the community and bring those to the district. That's our role. Curriculum, what we do in this district, is determined by the professionals, by the professional judgment, but also with the input of us as community members and us as we listen to the community members. We've had 2 meetings here, and I've heard community member after community member come and describe the impact. First of all, you've heard tonight some of the issues that we have in our schools. Our schools are not what we would like them to be in any way. Well, in many ways, but they're not where we'd like to be when we're in terms of race. We've heard members of the community come to us over and over again in the last several months and tell us, members of the minority members of this community, that this book is part of the problem. Not everybody feels that way, but there are some people who do. Some of our students who do. I know the children of some of the parents who've spoken to us tonight, and I've heard their voices because they've been friends of my kids in the school district. We are here to reflect the community values. We're not doing enough in this school district, and this, the Duluth schools recently went through this and decided to remove the book from the mandatory curriculum, and it was reported about in the Star Tribune. And I just wanted, there was a student who reflected, was quoted in the paper. I'd like to read that. Trox said she recalled reading from the book aloud in Duluth schools. As one of just a few black students, she felt uncomfortable. Some kids were visibly uncomfortable, she said, and others snickered. Some turned to look at her. She felt the stress response, anxiously anticipating the word. I was completely distracted from the book itself. I checked out emotionally and psychologically. That to me is a tragedy, that would go on in our classroom. And the problem is this, I know also some students, I know this goes on with some students in our district. That's not tolerable to me. What's the alternative? What do we do? I hear, there's two things going on here. There's a lot of good things around this book. People have come and given me this big pile of things about this book, why it's appropriate for our curriculum. I've also heard a lot of voices from people who say, there are these flaws. But the problem with those flaws is they disproportionately, they depend on who you are and where you come from. And that makes this a difficult decision. So I have two things. In fact, this is probably the most difficult decision I've faced in 9 years on the school board, or however many years it is. By the way, the problems with the gap, the problems with racial issues we have in the school district, I've been on this board a long time. I blame myself for those as much as anybody in the district, because I haven't made them a priority in my time. We've always had other issues we've had to deal with. And it's time to make them a priority. I've heard too much, and it's been really driven home tonight. When I'm, so again, this book, why are we talking about a book that puts up challenges to the students that we've made a commitment to dealing with the achievement gap? This book puts up, I have to take at face value this pile of commentary that I've received from parents and students of African Americans in the district. I have to take that at face value, because nothing I have heard from anybody else supporting this book has gone to directly dispel those questions, those problems that have been raised. When I look at decisions, I always like to do a risk analysis. That is, if we make the wrong decision, if our decision is wrong, what's the downside of that? I don't buy slippery slope arguments. I trust our ability to, as a district, to be discerning and to separate the wheat from the chaff, and when there's a real issue, deal with it. When there's not a real issue, pass on it. I trust this, so I'm not going to buy a slippery slope argument. But what about these two choices? If it's a mistake to retain the book, what do we lose? We've retained the book. We are still going to, the risk is that we will continue to have students who are negatively affected in our classrooms. A small number of students, I admit it, very small, sometimes just one. We'll have some students checking out because of this. That, to me, is a big risk. What if we make the other decision? We decide to not retain the book. We decided not to retain the book. What do we lose? But that turns out to be a mistake. What do we lose? We lose that we have one book that's going to be substituted for another book. I believe that the professionalism of our teachers, they will be able to find and teach around another book that will be able to achieve everything that we can with To Kill a Mockingbird, or nearly. Maybe there might be a little bit of difference, might be not quite as optimal, but I don't think that there's a huge risk. I don't think we're going to have an enormous hole in the curriculum that we cannot otherwise fill. So when I look at this and I see these two competing things, and I think we all have to accept that both sides are right. That this is a good book, and this also has some fatal, maybe not fatal, but significant flaws that present barriers to some parts of members of our community. I think we can start in common ground by agreeing that both of these sides are right, and we're going to have, the common ground is we're going to have to find a way to work around that. I look at the risk analysis. I look at what we really want to do, which is to work on the gap, achievement gap in this district. And when I do that, I have to come down ultimately on the side of taking this book off of the required reading lists and putting it in optional lists. I hope students read this book. I don't want to ban this book. I think it's an important book. But I also can't stomach the thought of and this has happened because I've talked to the student, of a lone student sitting in a classroom, lone African-American student sitting in a classroom of white students. And while a teacher explains what the meaning is, a white teacher explains what the meaning of this word is, they're dealing with an impact that nobody else in the room is dealing with, and they're checking out because of it.
So, Mr. President, may I make a motion to remove?
Does anybody else want to comment first?
I'd like to make a motion to remove the required reading of To Kill a Mockingbird and make it an optional read, and also create a community subcommittee with educators, with the community, a couple of board members, to look at this further, to find other adaptable books for today's children.
If I could comment, later on the agenda, we have an issue, we have a discussion item for committees. I'd like to separate, if possible, if with your consent, I would ask you to separate the two issues.
All right,
The other issue is that our policy requires us to have a reason for removing a book from the curriculum, and so the motion should encompass that. So you should, we need to have reason. At the previous meeting, we made the motion that it was, that the book was no longer consistent with our community values. You could bring that motion back, or you could modify your motion to along similar lines. But we do need a motion that includes a reason for that. And if anybody wants to help Andrew out with a suggestion, that's also an option.
So the motion is to move it from being required to optional.
Mm-hmm. Plus, we need to state a reason in the motion.
And I think a reason for me, and I don't know if anyone else want to chime in on it, for today's society, it is too much, I can't. This is hard.
You can. I like Carrie's language. If you want to use Carrie's language.
I think that because of this language, it's not good for today, and I'm stuck.
Sorry to put you in a tough spot.
I am stuck. I mean, is anyone else looking at it?
To be consistent, I wouldn't support it unless we also have guaranteed resources to replace the book that doesn't crash their budget or cause them extra. Because as everyone's pointed out tonight, it takes a lot of effort and work and resources to change a book like that. So without that.
Does that have to be provided in the motion?
For me to vote yes, it would. Yeah.
Okay, so you could make an amendment to the motion.
There needs to be a second.
There needs to be a second yet on the motion.
I'll second any motion. I'll second the motion.
Okay. Do we, the
the
question is,
motion?
what is the motion?
Yes, thank you.
Apologize, this is a little bit of a struggle. It's a challenge to get this exactly right.
Right words, because to me, like I said, it's still a great book. However, we can move it to just being optional. Don't not forcing kids of color or any kid to be uncomfortable reading this material. And I know that there are other options out there for them as well.
Can I suggest words that,
yes.
that a reason being that, for the reason that the book presents additional challenges for some students?
Yes.
Does that make sense?
I have a point of order.
Sure.
Why do you rule that a motion has to have a rationale? Because often we have many motions.
Because our policy in this case requires it.
Well, that's a good reason. I learned something today.
It is the only place in our policy where there's a statement that we have to do that with a motion.
We do a lot of things without a reason.
That's absolutely right. Without a stated reason. Do we have a complete sentence over there?
Yes.
Could you read it back to me?
Oh, the alignment.
Andrew McKinney made a motion to remove the requirement of. Help me, Jared.
So Andrew McKinney made a motion to remove the required readings to remove How to Kill a Mockingbird from the required reading list to make it an optional reading list. due to the, reason being, it presents additional challenges for some students. Is that?
And alignment.
Yeah, it does not align with today's values.
Yeah.
With
Yes.
community values, with current
Yes.
community values? It
Right.
does not align with current community
That's what I was
values.
looking at.
This is the
Okay.
most bizarre school board meeting. I feel like we are just losing credibility here, right and left. I'm sorry, I think I have to leave.
Okay, can you read that back,
Oh my gosh.
Jared?
Okay. Motion is to remove How to Kill a Mockingbird from the required reading list and to make it an optional read. Reason being, it presents additional challenges for some students and does not align with current community values.
Delete the word how.
Yeah, no.
Okay, has that been seconded? It's been seconded by Jeff. Discussion? Jeff, you wanted to make a motion? You can make a motion.
that, in order to do that, we also have to provide full resources that is needed to change the book out of their curriculum.
So the amendment would be something like the district will provide resources additional resources to
Completely replace the book in their curriculum.
for the replacement of the book in the
For the
curriculum.
replacement of the book in the curriculum. That is over and above their budget.
Can you say that again?
Yes, say it again, please.
I would make an amendment that if we were to do this, that we would supply all the resources needed to change the book over and above their budget. Over and above their yearly budget.
Is there a second? I'll second that. Okay, the discussion is on the amendment. You want to state a case for it?
Well, I think this case has been stated, that budgets are tight, time is tight, and if we're gonna switch out a book that they have very good, they've worked very hard to put into their curriculum, and I do trust them to teach the curriculum, then we need to honor and acknowledge and compensate that, the time needed to do that, so.
Further discussion?
Do we know that?
Dean's first, sorry, he had his hand up.
I understand and appreciate the sentiment, but I think that, I think it gets starting to get complex with the amount of resources and that sort of thing. You know, I don't know all that we get. Are we going to deal with this in the same manner in which we get any other controversial issue in the curriculum? We're going to remove the materials and have a resource allocation for other materials. I'm concerned about the quagmire where we would be getting into for that, and I'm also concerned. I think that this community engagement and debate has been a good and a healthy one. I think it's been enlightening to me and to members of the board, as well as our teachers and so forth. To many who are close to it, there's a lot of anguish and as well. I would like to avoid the board refereeing every controversial curricular decision that we have, unless there's well, I won't get into it any further. I think we're getting in awfully deep beyond some of our responsibility. I would like to take those same resources and put it into the catch-up committee and into putting into any outside resources or consultants we could deal with for professional development or teaching controversial issues. Because you can get rid of this book, there's going to be another one that comes up. If it's not the N word, it will be something else. And I think that I think we ought to either vote the book down or allow our curriculum committee to sustain itself and hopefully it can be taught with greater sensitivity and greater understanding on how to work with that. That would be mine. But I think we need to deal with the broader issue of the performance and a lot of it deals with the comfort and the place of kids of color and difference in our school system.
Susan, I'm sorry, Eric was.
You're the pass.
Okay, now Susan.
I strongly support additional resources that are needed to continue to provide training and strong community and staff support on this issue. But I do not support the motion, so I'm unable to support the amendment. So I'm sorry about that, Jeff. And the reason I don't support the motion is that I continue to feel I probably queried over 200 people. And as I said, I tried to be an ally and I tried to solicit opinions from minority individuals. So it didn't just look like I was asking my friends. It was not my friends that I asked. It was people that I didn't know, that I stopped on the street, that I talked to at the bus stop on Broadway. The committee directive is to move this to the English department, not just to make this decision, guys. Not just to make this decision. It's to carefully consider the place of this book in the curriculum, the context in which it is taught, other equivalent options or other ways to use the book that might include using a choice rather than required text, and support the professionalism of teachers and the need to involve teachers in the instructional material decisions. My daughter-in-law, who's a special ed teacher, has been teaching for 10 years, looked me in the face, and she does appear to love me, and said, who are you to make this decision? What expertise do you have to make this decision? And let me tell you, I have 2 undergraduate degrees and a PhD, and I'm not going there, guys, because my job is to help us figure out the right answer, not to tell them the right answers.
I would comment, hang on, in terms of, right now we're talking about the amendment to the original motion, the relevance of the amendment. If you don't support the motion, it does not mean you can't support the amendment. You should consider the your decision on the amendment should be whether, if assuming the motion passes, whether the amendment would be better. I'm sorry, the motion would be better with or without the amendment, even if you don't support the motion as a whole. Okay, Susan.
Well, I'm not comfortable with the amendment either,
Okay.
Because I don't think this is the forum to prescribe money. I mean, that comes up as a budgetary issue. If we uphold the review committee, which is still gonna be my position, we will be providing money for, I mean, that will go along with it, but that has to be budgeted, and I'm just not comfortable with us making a motion tonight without administrative recommendations as part of a budget. We will have to provide money for work to be done, because even a review committee, and my argument was, our teachers deserve to have the same experience the review committee did. They deserve to have the time to read materials. They've heard all of us, they've heard all the input. And I think they deserve to have those conversations and consider how they teach it. Are there things they need to teach it better? I don't think you can even compare Duluth, because we don't know how it was taught in another district. So I think that, I just think there are a lot of issues here. And I just very strongly feel that this belongs in the hands of our professional staff. I do trust that they've been listening. I do think that they'll read. I mean, we've all done a lot of read. I feel like I've been obsessed with this book for 3 months. I mean, I've read lots of other books. On the one hand, I've kind of enjoyed the intellectual exercise. On the other hand, it has been pretty stressful because we do understand that we have to do better. I do like the fact that this is bringing the focus back to the opportunity gap, because I think that is important to focus on. I do not share the belief that this book necessarily contributes to that. I think it provides, as I said at the last meeting, a really good vehicle for having a conversation that we have to have. They may find other books. I do think it's worth looking at a book to pair with it, but I think that's for our teachers to do. And some of the books that have been recommended, I looked up and read more about them, and I think they'd be problematic in 9th grade. They might be good for 11th and 12th grade. So I just think, again, that's not us. I'm with your daughter-in-law who says, how do we dare make this decision? I don't dare. So that's where I am. So I'm gonna have to vote against the amendment and the motion.
Oh, I'm gonna wait.
Sorry.
On the subject of the amendment, I support the amendment, but I believe that this is what would happen anyway if we pass this. That I'm quite confident that the staff will have the resources they need to do the job that we've given. Any more discussion on the amendment? Hearing none, we're voting just on the amendment to the main motion. All in favor?
I suggest a roll call so we can get the numbers.
Roll call vote starting with Andrew.
Aye.
Aye.
Nay.
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 Motion fails. So we're back to the debate on the main motion.
Did you say nay? I thought you said
Nay.
Said nay.
Can I get that again?
Aye, nay.
Okay. Got it.
Okay, back to debate on the main motion. Jeff.
The reality is that if we take this book out tonight or keep it in, it's not gonna affect our opportunity gap at all, like an inch. It's not gonna move it. The problem is, and the reason we're here tonight is because we haven't built community within our community. And unfortunately, the English department has to pay for that. Had we built community amongst all of our people, all of our students, all of our parents, they would trust us to handle this topic, but they don't, and for good reason they don't. So it's unfortunate that we're here at this point for this. And I think we have a lot of work to do with the opportunity gap, but I don't think this is gonna matter either way, but I can't support it if we aren't gonna support our English teachers in the end, so.
Where are we parliamentary?
What's that?
Where are we?
We're debating the main motion.
The main motion?
On amendment, we did not, the amendment failed, we're debating the main motion.
You wanna read that? You wanna read that again?
Yep,
The
so the
main
motion
motion.
is to remove To Kill a Mockingbird from the required reading list to the optional reading list because the book presents additional challenges for some students and does not align with current community values.
Comments? This isn't about Duluth. This is about things we've heard here tonight, things I've heard in private conversations, things I've heard in private emails that happen in our district. Who are we to make this decision? We're elected by thousands of people in the school board in this district to reflect the community values and bring them here to this organization. That's who we are. That's who I am at the very least. And I really think we need to take very seriously, because these objections that have been raised, I haven't heard anything that dispels, that says, oh, we're going to do this different, we're going to do this better, or those concerns that have been brought to us, they're not really there. Nobody's been able to say that. These are real concerns, these are real things that are standing in our way. It's not hypothetical, and I'm urging my colleagues on the board to listen to those voices and take them seriously. Dean.
Peter, I respectfully disagree with your statement, because I think that the statements that we've heard many nights here from citizens, mostly concerned about this, I think, are not going to be lost on the ears of this board, administration, or teachers making decisions, okay? I think it is probably, and I think a lot of this debate has not gone for naught. I think it's opened our eyes, even though it may have not changed our vote on where the responsibility for these decisions rests. What I would like to do would be to go back to where you and I debated this for what seemed like 2 hours at Subway one night after a board meeting. But I would like to deal with the issue of just the book without resource allocation question on that, and I think that you've at least heard from at least 3, if not 4 members of this board that we would like to, whether it's a committee or whatever it is, to have a major initiative on closing the gap and other associated issues on that deal with race, and whether it be in social studies or whether it be in English and that sort of thing. And I think that needs to be separated from a decision on a single book, whether we go up or down. If some of the underlying causes are the kind of concern that I heard expressed, up or down vote on this one book isn't going to make that difference. We need to make a concerted investment of time and resources and talent into addressing this. From time to time, when I've been on the board, we've gotten reports on how we're doing up and down, but often we've forgotten that. We need to have a sustained look at that and to deal with it systematically and holistically. And I don't think that's going to be done on whether this book is required, optional, or what. I think we see. I'm voting on sustaining on the manner in which we make curricular and teaching materials decisions at this point in time. And I think the issue I want to get to are the other issues of what's happening to kids of difference and of race or whatever the factors will be.
Other comments? I agree with everything you say, Dean, except that your statement that you don't think this book has much to do with it, because we've heard voices tell us.
We dealt
with
that
Dean?
in Subway.
Dean? Yeah, I get to talk. We've heard voices, it's not hypothetical, we've heard voices in this room, we've heard voices, students who have said, this is part of the problem, and I can't dismiss that. Anyone else? All right, we're voting on the main motion, which would be we're voting on the main motion, which would be to
Make it an option.
make it an option, move it from the required list and make it an option. All in favor?
Roll call vote, please.
Okay.
Roll call.
Yeah, I know, I do that, but it's hard to keep track, so we don't do that.
Is it hard to keep track?
For me, yeah.
So when Joyce is here, that's gonna
Yes,
be
No,
yes.
no,
when
Joyce is
here.
the
I'll
one
go
who said
first,
no.
I don't mind. I mean, if you have a list.
No,
You
no.
want me to, or-
Andrew, you start, roll call vote starting with Andrew.
Aye.
Nay.
Aye.
Nay.
Eric?
To make it an option.
Yeah.
To make it, can you read it again?
So the main motion is to remove To Kill a Mockingbird from the required reading list to the optional reading list because the book presents additional challenges for some students and does not align with current community values.
I'm gonna abstain.
Dean?
It's down to me again, huh?
Yeah.
I should be in surgery. Nay.
Motion fails. Now, on this issue, we do need to come up with a result, so we can't leave it at this. Susan?
I'd like to make a motion. I move to confirm the review committee's decision to retain To Kill a Mockingbird in the English curriculum with the recommendation of further consideration by the Monona Grove High School English Department of place in curriculum, context in which the book is taught, and possible equivalent options for use of the book. And Mary, I have it typed for you, so.
Thank you.
Nice.
Whether it goes down or
Is
not,
there,
I have it
is there a
typed for you.
second?
No,
Is-
I make a motion the book, I
No,
don't
you-
have that direction.
Susan's, there's,
I need a second though first.
need a second for
I'll
Susan's
second
motion.
it.
Thank
It's
you.
been seconded by Dean.
Can I make a motion to amend?
You may.
Can you please read that back again for me, Susan?
Right. I move to confirm the review committee's decision to retain To Kill a Mockingbird in the English curriculum with the recommendation of further consideration by the Monona Grove High School English Department of place in curriculum, context in which the book is taught, and possible equivalent options for use of the book.
I'd like to make an amendment to change recommendation to requirement.
Require that they consider, is that what you're saying?
Require, I would like.
So it would say requirement of further consideration, right, yeah, I get that. So,
Would
then-
you just
so if you're
accept
amending
that?
it, then, no, I'll want a second. On it.
I'll second the amendment. Moved and seconded, so we're discussing right now the amendment to change recommended to required. So this would require,
I don't know the difference.
Can I
sure,
make a point? That unfortunately contradicts the first part of the motion. The first part of the motion is to confirm the review committee's decision.
mm-hmm,
That would no longer, you'd have to modify that.
Well,
Because the committee's decision was to review.
That's a
Can I
good point.
let me try to change my amendment.
sure.
Can I keep what Susan said and amend that we add, that the curriculum department, the English department adds a new culturally responsive option of required curriculum from an African American author?
you have to read that again.
Sure. So, in addition, that the English department and curriculum department
This is twice, I'm sorry.
will add a new culturally responsive option to the curriculum from an African American author.
So your amendment would in fact keep
Keep To Kill a
Keep
Mockingbird,
bird.
but add
another option.
yes, add another option.
Can I just wanna clarify, so what you're saying in this point is, as a board member, you're gonna make them, instead of having them make the decision about the option, and, or however they wanna build it, maybe they're gonna pull it, I don't know. But
So-
you're gonna tell them what to do, I just wanna understand.
Well,
Yes, you are.
don't put words in my mouth,
Read
but
it to me then.
what I'm saying is, I think that there may be some common ground, at least to keep the book, but then address the concerns that there is not enough books in the curriculum that are culturally responsive to our African American students. Clearly, we've heard that tonight, and I'm just trying to think of a way to address that issue while keeping the book, because I do think that we should keep the book, but I also think that we should keep that in you know, as a
That's
concern.
contradictory to
If it's contradictory, I'll remove it.
Susan?
Well, I think it's contradictory to the whole spirit of it, because I think the spirit of it was that we confirmed the review committee's decision to retain the
Okay.
book.
Hang on a second.
And,
Susan.
hold on,
No,
and-
no, Susan.
Well, it needs a second.
I
Can-
did,
can
that's
talk
right,
rather
exactly,
than
I'm gonna
say that
ask,
it
I
needs a
mean,
second, so.
I'm gonna ask,
I thought
I was
I got
hoping
that
you had a
right.
brief,
Sorry.
if you had a
Somebody have
brief
a second.
comment about that, that would be fine, but before we get into
Okay,
it, let's
then
see
it
if we
has
have a
to
second.
The amendment has to have a second.
Let's have a
You're right.
Yeah, does anybody wanna second it to the amendment sort of as presented? Or make a recommendation for modification before?
Has to have a second before you do that even.
No, it actually, it doesn't, you can have a brief discussion about modification. Okay. Motion, the motion doesn't, well, we don't have, it doesn't have a second, so. It doesn't fail, it just doesn't have a second, so it's not picked up.
I thought the importance of upholding the review committee's decision was that it does give our professional staff the direction to have this conversation, and I'm assuming that they will, I know they're already talking about it, that they will be looking at additional books to add as optional, whatever they may, as you said, they may decide to make this optional, they have a lot of they have a wide breadth of decisions to make. I don't wanna, I guess I still feel that's the way to go, and that's what my motion is, so. I have a hard time seeing an amendment being necessary.
Is it? Dean?
I would tend to agree with the information that has been provided to us from this table in emails and a lot of other sources and that sort of thing. I think that our English department curriculum committee has plenty of initiative and ammunition to go by to make any necessary modifications. I would hope they would give due consideration to a lot of what they've seen and heard, but I would urge them to do so, but I would leave the decision to them.
Okay, yeah, Chair, just a point of clarification, and it kind of goes to your, previous motion, Jeff, with regard to the resources. So just so the board understands, every summer we dedicate about 2,000 hours for teacher curriculum review work. And so we're in the process right now of finalizing about how that will be divvied up between the schools and departments and so on. And part of that allocation absolutely will be for the English department for this summer, regardless of this, but particularly if this motion is approved.
So the budget's there already.
It will be, yeah. And that will also include, not only for this curriculum review, but as part of our normal budgeting process, any additional resources absolutely will be a priority. And, we could talk more about that when we get into our budget, conversation. It might be more appropriate there, but with our zero-based budgeting, that means you make priorities, and clearly curriculum is #1 priority.
Okay, we're debating the motion to uphold the committee's decision, the review committee's decision.
Didn't go through. There was
No.
no motion.
No, there's no, I just made the motion, it's been seconded. There's
It
no-
has been seconded. Who seconded it?
Yeah,
I thought there was no
Dean
second.
Dean seconded it.
Oh, so you made the motion again after it didn't go through?
No,
And now
No, that was the
that
amendment,
was the last
that
meeting.
was the amendment that was not seconded.
Okay.
It is a little confusing.
It is a little confusing. Sorry for the sausage. That's the way it works. Comments, discussion.
I'll go quick.
Jeff?
Has nothing to do with this amendment, but I think.
We're not on the amendment. We're on the motion.
We're on this thing,
Yeah.
a little bit to do with that. I think that we need to change our policy to make sure that the review committee, anytime we do it in the future, has public comment. Because look at everything we would have missed out on in this discussion, and they didn't allow for that in the review committee. So I think they missed out on that before they made the decisions.
Future agenda item coming from the
I-
policy.
Yeah, I too believe that the committee's process was flawed, that they did not take public comment. I think that it would have benefited from public comment. On the subject of the committee, everybody on the committee expressed reservations about this book. Acknowledged some of these issues that are before us, but then voted 4-1 to uphold it. I really think that there are options out there that don't require everybody to have reservations.
But Peter,
Mm-hmm.
your description of that committee's actions, that it had reservations, reflects everybody around this table.
Yes, I absolutely agree with that.
So,
And
but
I think that
we all have a mix of concerns on authority to do this, the nature of the book, the instruction, and the purpose of it, and that's why we've been here for many nights doing it, or at least you have.
and like I said, I think we should aim higher. Find something that we all don't have such reservations about. Are we done? All right, all in favor?
Roll call vote, please.
Starting with Susan. We're gonna do it this time.
Aye.
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 Nay. Motion carries. Thank you very much. Let's take a 10-minute recess. All right, I think we'll go back up to superintendent's report.
Okay.
Dan.
Okay, I have 2 items. First one is with regard to the school safety grants. And so the attachment I have is the announcement that came from the Department of Justice. And so in that has all the criteria and so on. And so we absolutely will be submitting the grant application. Jared and I met with a team to go through the application. We have our current safety plan and list of things that we would like to do for school improvements, and they will fit in very well with the things that are eligible. And so there are really two criteria. The first set starts on page 8 of that large document, the eligible primary security expenditures. That's very narrow in focus on the primary, classroom door locks, or school entry glass shatter-resistant film. That's it for the primary, to make sure, you know, and so we don't qualify for the classroom door locks. We have locks on all of our classroom doors. Surprised to learn that there are some schools that don't.
Do we have shatterproof glass?
No, so the second piece we don't. So that was the part that we'll apply for. And so it's interesting when if you look at that, the second page, or the next page, they give the very specifics about which windows qualify and so on. And so I think we've estimated that would be about $7,000 to, it's a film that you put on top to make it shatterproof.
Bulletproof or shatterproof?
Shatterproof, not bulletproof.
So is that just like the office entryways?
Correct, yeah.
So they have to go one classroom over to get in? Okay.
That's all, yeah. Is there, you know,
It's
when
all
we
about
put the
making it
door in the
harder.
high school, I believe that brick wall, when you come in the first entryway, is a structural piece, and it would have been really, really expensive to put a window there, but I'm just, is that anything we could revisit? Or
I think we are reevaluating all those
It would
entrances.
be nice if they could see people, because they
Yes.
can't really, well, they have a camera, I guess, but it's one person, it's just, seems awkward.
Yeah, the line of sight is something that's
Right.
really critical, so.
Where's that?
In the high school, when you walk in, there's that brick wall, so that when they buzz you in, they're looking at a camera. They aren't really seeing exactly who's out there or what, I mean, they can't, like all the other schools can see you because there's glass, which is a good and a bad thing, but they can't. And I just was, you know, I think when we looked at it, it was a structural wall and it was gonna be really expensive to put a window in there.
I must look very safe because they buzz me in right away.
Well, yeah, they do have a camera, but, yeah.
Who knows what he's hiding in that cave?
Anyway, sorry,
Um,
that's my question.
And Dan, in one of the proposals, I'm not sure I was looking at this one with this detail, they also talked about the training.
Yep.
And when we went to the safety meeting, that was something that was talked about
Yep.
extensively.
Yep. So.
We talked about training
Yep,
standards.
absolutely. So part of, not only is that an eligible expenditure, but it's also a requirement to even apply for the grant that we need to certify that we are providing this training for staff. And in fact, we already have it in place. So that's nothing new. We just need to document, and that all is in place. So, so when you get to the secondary level, it's actually called the advanced security expenditures. That starts on page 10 of the document. There are many other items that are eligible for that funding. And my understanding, correct me if I'm wrong, Jared, that the goal is that every school will be approved that applies. It is technically a competitive grant, but they certainly want to approve all schools. And so the $100 million that is allocated, that comes to approximately $20,000 per school statewide. Okay, and so it includes for us MG21, so we have 6 buildings that would be eligible, so that we will be applying for the $120,000 for the $20,000 per school. I think you can apply for more than that, but it's a higher level of, you have to be able to justify that, and they ask that that be the base level funding that we apply for. And so
That's not a lot of money really for this stuff, because I remember we did the stuff we did the first time around was, I think, $380,000.
Yeah, absolutely. So when we look at all the lists of things that we could do to improve the building structure and the school safety, one of the top priorities that has been our security cameras. They are in need of replacement completely. You know, they're old analog models, and so to do an entire replacement for the whole district would be about $400,000. So this $120,000 would go a long ways to a good start on that.
So which cameras are we replacing? We don't have cameras everywhere in every building.
No, we do not.
Okay.
Okay.
And that's a lot of cameras, it seems to me,
Yeah.
$400,000.
Well, it's the infrastructure that, you know, the servers behind it and so on. The storage is probably as much as the cameras themselves. And so we're actually in the process, I think, of getting several quotes, but I think that's kind of the number that we're looking at in that neighborhood. And so certainly at the high school, we have them much more, many more cameras at the high school, where at the elementaries, the primary is to focus the entrances and, so on. And so in any case, that's what we will be submitting for our security piece. And again, that'll get us a good start, towards that.
I have a question. I remember when that came up early on the board before you were superintendent, when we did some of this stuff. I think we had the $300,000 plus expenditure on this stuff, and on the high school was always an issue because unless you get rid of open access to the high school and all the entrances you have, do you plan on changing the high school open campus concept, or reducing the access to other than one door? Because it seems to me it's kind of, an open campus high school is functionally always open.
Yeah, well, the open campus, remember, is only during lunch periods, and essentially is treated the same as before and after school as students come and go. Clearly the doors are unlocked at that time, but it is a single entrance, and the key is having staff there to monitor the people that are coming and going. And so at this point, no, there's not a recommendation to change, into a closed campus.
But there's always people coming in and out, it seems to me, and it seems to me that everybody who comes out is always very friendly to everybody coming in. Particularly if you have a cane, they will do that.
Yeah.
But it's no, seriously, I think that
somebody's watching.
It seems to me that I'm not saying to get rid of open campus, but I think to some extent you have something of a fool's errand to try to close it down.
Well, and keep in mind that even when the buildings doors are locked and people are buzzed into the office, okay, it's not like we have armed security guards at the door, but the idea is at least to have a control knowing who is coming in and out of the building, and that's why it is critical when those doors are open at the beginning and end of the day that we have staff there monitoring, people coming in and out of the building as well. Without question, it's a larger, it's harder to control. But I think one of the opportunities we have is, with the staff training and make sure we have those in place. And we do our due diligence that before we buzz people in, that we are sure who we're buzzing in and so on. So reviewing those protocols, but we also want to make it a friendly place for parents that they have access as well. So we are having those conversations regularly, and so the physical building is part of it, but the procedures we have in place are just as important as well.
Because the reality is every school shooter has been part of the school community.
Mm-hmm.
So you're not, almost every school shooter has been part of the school community. So you're not buzzing in a stranger, you're buzzing in, what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Hopefully you see what they're carrying.
Well,
Right.
Not in the case of Sandy Hook.
Okay. Yeah, no, he had went there, I thought.
Yeah, but he was not.
He was not a current student.
He wasn't a current student. He had been a student for years.
So, I'm sorry, Jared and I together will be writing, this grant application. Did I miss any key pieces there? Okay. Is there any other questions on the safety grant? I believe it's due June 8th. We'll make sure we have it well in advance.
I think that in terms of like the film, the cost of that is low enough to do those sidelights. Even if we don't get the second grant, we could easily go ahead with that.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Because it wouldn't make any sense not to.
Agreed. Okay, the second piece of my report is just a heads up. This will be a discussion later when we actually talk about contracts, but I just wanted to introduce it now so you had an opportunity to think about and see what kind of questions that you might have. But it's relating to our coordinator contracts, and it is very appropriate as far as the discussion we've had earlier tonight about the work of how do we do review of curriculum in this district. As I mentioned, and this has been in place for many years, we budget about 2,000 hours for the summer for teachers to work in curriculum teams and developing curriculum. But historically, that's been really isolated at the buildings. And not that they haven't done good work, they've done excellent work, but there's really been no one from the district level that's really been part of that. We think it's essential as we move forward with this planning that our curriculum assessment coordinator as well as our student services and equity coordinator are part of those teams, in the summer. And it's definitely works, towards the work that we were talking about tonight. And so currently both of those individuals have been given 210-day contracts. We would like them to be working throughout the summer as well with our teachers during that work. And so when we come to contract times, I will be recommending year-round contracts for them. At that time, I'll give you the fiscal piece as well. But I just wanted to introduce it now so you can think about that, see what questions you have when we bring that forward later as a proposal. So it's just those two. I just added the job descriptions just as a reminder what those positions are.
Now, do you use coordinator generically or people with that title?
People with that title, yeah.
Okay. Okay. Policy committee report.
Policy committee met on April 26th and today, May 9. We've now completed the review and approval of all the Neola updates from December 2017 and January 2018. And for at least the next couple of weeks, we are caught up for the first time in like 3 years, or whatever. So the approved policies are ready for a submission to the board for first reading at the May 23rd meeting. That's pretty much it. And then we'll talk about other things on the policy, coming up on policy. But we do have coming up on the agenda some review of some other aspects of our policies, but also certainly this instructional materials, all the related policies to it, but we thought we wanted more board input on that too, so that'd be a later agenda item as well. But that's it. We do have a tentative meeting scheduled for June 20th, I think, at 9 o'clock. So.
Susan?
Peter, could we kind of adopt as a board, again, part of it depends on when that committee meets, but some of these groups meet routinely. So for instance, the Monona Grove Education Foundation, we're really pretty inconsistent about getting a report on that group, and they're moving into their serious fundraising phase with a November 3rd celebration. So it's going to be important that the board kind of gets a 2-minute update, I think. And they meet the second Tuesday.
Point of order.
I know, it's not on the agenda, but
and not all of us agree with that. So
I guess
it's a discussion item as well.
Okay, so
hang on, stop.
Can we figure out
when we get to future meetings, we'll talk about that.
Under future
Let's do that
okay,
under future
okay,
meetings.
Okay, fine, thanks. I just wasn't sure we were going to talk about it.
Okay. Okay.
Okay, so I'm done. Thanks.
Yeah.
Did you have something, Dan? No.
Well, just one quick comment, I'm sorry, related to the policy committee,
Oh, okay.
and pick up on what Susan just mentioned. I think it would be appropriate, what you've had to deal with tonight with instructional materials, clearly we want to have that conversation. The policy we had in place is the first time we've had to use it. When it was adopted, we thought it kind of made sense. Here's a good procedure for, reviewing complaints and appeals. Clearly, it wasn't a good policy. It didn't serve our purposes. So the policy committee will be working on that. Certainly, we want all board input on that, and so be reflective about how this process worked. And we certainly need a process in place, but there is, to me, wide open about how that might occur. As far as even if we have a review committee, that's not the only way of hearing that, and what the board role might be versus other groups. And
let's bring that forward as a future agenda item, and we'll discuss it, and then we'll refer to policy to write it into.
What we were thinking.
Yeah.
All right. That brings us to board committees. Jared, would you mind? Can you put the committee policy 155 up on the screen?
Sure.
0155.
Okay. And I apologize, just added a last minute. The proposals, if you lack of a better term, that, you know, Eric submitted, and Jeff, I just added the board docs late today, so they are on there now. If you looked earlier today, they weren't there.
I want to start with a discussion of the existing committee, to see if we have, you know, as described in policy 155, and I want to know, first of all, is there comment, is there a discussion about the roles of the existing committees? We have community engagement and employee relations, which, did they ever meet?
They only meet as needed.
They only meet as needed,
Right.
yeah.
So if they don't meet,
So I
it's
don't
not
think
that
they,
time.
no, exactly, in fact, it's a good thing if they don't meet.
It's when they're unresolved.
We do have to have a committee,
Right.
that is true. But, whoops.
I think it's only met twice since it was formed, and it's basically been the people on the personnel committee have then constitute the employment relations committee to hear concerns or complaints, basically.
What I would suggest, we have the Community Engagement, Communications, and Government Relations Committee. We do have we are going to be hiring a community, what's the direct, community engagement?
Communications and community engagement.
Which, my assumption would be involved with that committee work.
Absolutely.
And I would like to hold off on making modifications to that committee until allowing that person and the board to have a discussion about what we'd like to do. We want to do it fairly quickly because we have community members involved.
I thought we were ready to hire that person.
Yes, or just about.
The community members are aware of the time issue too, so.
Right, I know.
It's not,
Right, but we just want to get everybody rolling,
Right.
right? But I think we should hold off the discussion on that one until we have somebody involved we can bring along in the discussion.
I agree with that.
Okay. Then moving down to the personnel committee, well, this is something we certainly need because of the work that they do, working with the staff and the teachers. Any comments or discussion about the role of the committee as it's listed here? Susan?
Well, Peter, one thing that I think I noticed on personnel committee this year is that it's really valuable to have 3 members on the committee. Even though the board president might be there, they're not a voting member, because if you only have 2 and one doesn't show up, and that occasionally happens, then you basically have to cancel the committee because you don't have a quorum. But if you have, and I was thinking most specifically about personnel and policy, because they need to do the work in that. In the community engagement, that seemed to work great with Carrie and Susan. But in policy, it really helps to have 3. Because it's a lot of work, and sometimes one's done this piece and one's done this piece, and
I understand, Susan?
I don't have any changes for either personnel or policy. We're on personnel, and I do like the idea of having it be composed of up 2-3 board members. I definitely prefer to have 3. I think on most committees, because what I found in policy is, believe it or not, we argue about stuff, and Jeff's witnessed many times. And it is helpful to have a 3rd person sometimes to be able to balance and weigh in, and I think that's true for most committees. I mean, you can function with 2, but I just think having up to 3 is good. And if 3 people don't want to be on it, then you can do 2. But in general, I like that idea much better, and I think, you know, people can make the choice of how many committees they want to be on.
Yeah, this was something that I wanted to bring up and get feedback on, which is that the policies say you can appoint up to 3 members.
Right.
The question is, do you mind if circumstances arise because of the workload, and we're talking about additional committee, is there objection to having 2 members on a committee in general? I understand that 3 is probably preferred, but I mean, the chair has the flexibility to do 2. But the question is, does the rest of the board have a strong feeling of that, or is there a consensus on the board about whether or not 2 can be appropriate? Susan?
I guess I think if 3 people want to be on a committee and you have 3, I think we should be going with 3. And I think, because I also think some people are willing to be on a couple, some people only want to be on 1. I think that's fine.
Yeah,
if
well,
you only have 2, you might have to go with 2.
Right.
Because
Well,
I had to do that 1 year.
Yeah, I can always appoint a 3rd person. The chair can always.
If nobody offers.
Yes, right. You can appoint people. They don't have to volunteer for it.
And they can refuse.
The question is how hard do I have to beat the bushes to get the
Got
third person?
Yeah.
So if there's not any strong objections to, depending on a worked out, with knowing 3 is preferred, but not having to, if necessary, leaving it 2, I think that can work, right? Okay. The personnel deals with handbook issues, deals with negotiations. I think these actually are pretty accurate, the statements about the Personnel and Policy Committee.
Yep.
But if anybody has any comments, all right. So the question then becomes, we've had people talk about setting up an additional committee. What's that? Or 2, or 3, or 6. You know. If everybody's recommendations, we'd have 5 committees, but I don't think we want to go that way. The question is, what do we do? And now we have time for, Dean's brought it up before, so let's have a discussion about what directions we want to go. Susan?
And then Dan, maybe just a summary would be really great. So we basically have a recommendation from Jeff and a recommendation from Dean. Do I have that right?
And I just gave you another one.
And then would you, Dan,
And me.
we had, oh, okay, Eric, so we have
Right.
3. And then, I'm sorry, I don't mean to put you on the spot, Lisa, but she had a great recommendation when we were talking about dealing with these issues. And I don't feel that I should necessarily.
I'd like to hear what the board thinks first, and I'll be glad to react to it.
Great, okay, so, okay.
Dan's not going to stick his neck out for us. So, comments?
So basically, if you take a Venn diagram with mine, Eric's, and Susan's, there's going to be a big chunk in the middle there.
Okay.
From what I understand.
Yep.
So what are the issues that people think we should be working on as a board?
Well,
Go ahead.
that's part of what I thought in this, and I had also called Lisa to think, because I think she does have input, because I was thinking of a curriculum committee, and she pointed out that we don't really operate in a silo anymore, and it really should be broader than that to fit kind of how we operate. So that's where I came up with this kind of, teaching and learning and equity, because I thought that's really takes the instructional piece. I also looked at what Madison had. They have what they call an instruction committee, I think, or something, and then they have an operations. They only have 2. They must have some other ones, but I looked at some other boards, committees, and I actually, because I ran to Andrew Goodell, talked to him a little bit about it. He agreed that this kind of thing made sense to tie these together, and actually the ideas that you guys submitted sort of do that. But I think I would like us to focus more on some of these kinds of teaching and learning goals and what we're really doing and how we think they're working, and be able to have more of we kind of bent Dan's ear for about another hour after our policy meeting today, talking about this stuff because service delivery, gifted and talented, the opportunity gap, all that stuff. There's a lot of stuff that we get reports on, but as Dean said, I think we get the report and we think, well, we're not doing great in that, but we know we're still working on it, but we're not really connected to it. So that's why I think we get this sense all the time that we don't really know what's happening. So that having a general committee like this where you could just have a real discussion about some of these issues and not just find out what are we really doing about some of these things would be a good way to go. And the reason I was calling mine an ad hoc is because I thought maybe we could kind of see how it goes for a year and then decide next year if we wanted to make it a standing committee, and we could talk more about the membership and that kind of thing. The only concern I had with yours, Jeff, is I don't want to change the current community engagement committee until we talk to the communications director. Because I think that one has a bit more broad, well, I wouldn't put that in the title of your committee, because I think the community engagement committee has a broader purpose, and we had that subgroup that Andrew and we had another person and I were kind of working on, which was more specifically directed at engaging minority parents, which related very directly to what Eric was talking about in his ad hoc committee on the opportunity gap, because we talked to Andrew, I think, about part of why we wanted to engage minority parents was because we do see that as connected to that gap. So that was coming out of that committee already, and we just didn't finish, So I'm not sure what I think about the other ones. I guess I think we do need something like this, and maybe some of Jeff's, and
I put family instead of community because I thought we have to focus on our families instead of the community.
See, we talk about using family in our committee.
But the community engagement, I feel, is for the community, like everybody, that if you have kids, had kids, don't have kids, everything. But I think we need to focus more on the family engagement.
But
Like
that
you
was
said,
one
the
of our,
minority
that was
parents.
our sub kind of thing, was family. In fact, we
Okay.
talked about changing the name to family, but we didn't, you know, anyway, so yeah, it's all a discussion to have, I guess.
So, there's kind of two things here, and I want to sort of get a consensus of where the focus should be. And should we do a bigger focus or a more narrow focus? And sort of the what I hear is, well, we need a place to engage on curriculum in general, which I think is true.
Right.
I also hear, well, we really want to focus on equity and achievement gap. Do we go after a group with a bigger picture and a focus on one, maybe? Or do we have a committee that's specifically related to equity and achievement gap? Or do we do both? Any thoughts on that? Susan?
Well, one of the things that's really interesting, one of the things I've tried to be more knowledgeable about as a board member are things, some of our special programming, you know, mental health, gifted advanced learners, special needs, reading needs like dyslexia, things like that. And it's really hard to do that as a big board. I've been asking for those presentations for 6 months. And the truth is we just haven't had time to fit them in. The staff is more than willing to meet with me for hours and discuss that, but then you don't know anything about it. And one of the things we were talking about in the advanced learning thing is these really neat things, programs that they're doing. So they have all these 5 different categories, and one is leadership, and they're actually going out. So there is a relationship. One of the things they've talked about is opening the doors for the AP programs at the high school. That's just an example. So if we have these leadership things, can we build it? So one of the things I want us to do is have it in an arena. That's why that teaching, learning, equity thing seemed to fit, because it's, what are you going to teach? How do you teach it? How do they learn from the way you teach? And then are we meeting the achievement gap, as always being one of the questions you ask at the end. Maybe just having people focus on the achievement gap this year, but then they're going to start being redundant on looking at the programming that we already have if they're doing that in teaching and learning. And then in the equity, so the equity, race, and family engagement, equity seems to me to be in both the teaching, learning, and equity and the achievement gap, right? Correct? Isn't that a piece?
You know, my thinking of having a specific committee, whether it be ad hoc or whatever, and the reason I put this together is, especially even after some of the comments tonight, I thought, you know, having a more refined focus for a committee to specifically look at why the achievement gap may be happening in our district, and trying to maybe identify some of the external factors outside of the classroom that may be causing that, and then present that, you know, that information that the committee finds back to the board and the superintendent, you know, to consider. I just, that was my goal in doing this. My concern is having the achievement gap attached to other committees, teacher learning or equity, or even Jeff's committee, that it may be watered down or lost, even though it certainly has an effect to that. I think having a more defined focus, maybe hopefully can pinpoint or identify some of the issues maybe that the school district hasn't identified yet. So that was my thinking of it. So,
Andrew?
I already know some of the barriers that you haven't faced. Now, when you say family, what family are you talking about? 2-parent home?
Any family. Any family
Now,
that has children.
well, hold on. Now, you say any family. Now, 2-parent home that's stable really don't have issues and barriers because they got 2 working parents. The kids are going to school. They're doing their thing. When you come from a 1-parent home, like myself, you have barriers. I have to be the man of the house. Some of these kids can't stay after school. They have to go straight home, knowing that they're failing. but they have to take care of their siblings. See, there's barriers involved in this, and that's what we're all missing. And you guys are not used to that. And you haven't been used to it for 25 years. You have a lot of people, not just of color, but you do have some white students moving into our school district that have some serious barriers. And I work in the system knowing who these kids are, where they come from. You got hair, you got all the drugs, you got all this stuff going. And they're coming in here. If we can't focus on the barriers, that's where your achievement gap starts. It's with those students that have those barriers. That's what we need to start focusing on first, is to find out who the parent or parents are who have these barriers. How do we get them engaged? How do we get that parent engaged? And it's so hard for teachers because they teach them with their hands behind their back. They can't do nothing. It's almost like they just only here for 8 hours and then they gotta go. It used to be a time in the days when teachers would be at because they enjoyed it. It wasn't because of all the money they make. They would be 6 in the morning, 6 at night, going to the parent PTOs as well, being part of the community. But as time, as Bob Dylan said, time, they are changing. They changed on me. They changed in here. They changed all in Wisconsin. And we haven't caught up with it. I'm letting you know where the barriers are because I'm a survivor. I know how to do it. I know where it is. I know what to do. And that's where we start. That's why I was part of the community engagement. That's what I thought we'd be focused to get that, to get those barriers, find out who they are. Because when you looked in this audience, I don't think there was a single parent in here. I think every parent in here were married, kids, doing okay in school. Some may have some issues, you know, with fighting or whatnot. But not one was in here, a single parent. Because they probably at work, working 2-3 jobs to keep an apartment, duplex, wherever they're living. That's where the barriers are. If we can get there, find out what's going on, if we can help them parents to get those kids to stay in school, not to be a dropout, to say there is a brighter day. And I can attest to that because I'm one. I could have gave up a long time ago, but I didn't. And I know it takes hard work, and there are barriers within barriers because even at where I'm at now, there are still barriers on me. Yes.
That's
Susan?
so incredibly well said. And we did a huge state study committee about healthcare, and we did similar thoughts. So if we were looking at, let's say we just took the word teaching, and within that we said, what are the barriers, or whether it's teaching or learning, what are the barriers to that? And we identified those, and then we set goals for how to overcome the barriers. Once you can get those down in writing and start identifying them, then you can prioritize them, and then you can start building solutions. One of our special ed teachers, Grace Kylo, was doing exactly that. She was visiting the homes. Nobody knew they didn't have any beds to sleep on. You went in there and there was no furniture. I mean, so how do you sleep at night? That's a
That's-
piece.
We're a little
far
afield.
Yeah, well, can I just jump in? I really appreciate everything you had to say, Andrew, and that is the work that needs to be done. But I think when you're talking about committees, you need to understand, okay, what your role is as board members, and it is to hold our staff accountable, support that work, and understand it as well. And so I think when you look at that, we talk about if there's going to be a committee as a way of opening that dialogue between the board and our staff, great. And then part of that is then supporting that work, and whatever that might be, to make that happen. But I'm gonna be honest, it's not the board's role to solve it, to be a partner with us, you know, with that. And some of you obviously have some expertise, you know, that you can bring to the table. And of course, all of us welcome expertise from everywhere. But I think we have to start with, I don't think everyone on the board really understands the work that is being done right now by our staff.
And that's actually part of the issue that we need to address.
Right,
That's right.
right.
And doing committee structure, part of that is, we don't all need to be or necessarily want to be involved in every deep discussion on every issue of the board, and doing it as a committee with a smaller group, those people are really passionate about it, really want to get into it, or can do that. One of the issues I'd like to bring up is that particularly on the issues of equity in the district, I think we need to bring in diverse voices from people in the community, which argues for me that we have a committee that's focused on a particular small range of issues related to the equity and achievement gap, rather than a broader committee, because that may not be of interest to it would be a different sort of selection of people, I think, depending on what the focus of the committee is over time.
Well,
Jeff?
Can I just clarify something so I can understand?
Yep.
My understanding, I just want to make sure this is correct, Dan, and the rest of the board, is that the committee is to review, create, and advise the board, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah,
But
they're all advisory. Yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
And then,
But they also offer they offer a better opportunity for dialogue between the board and the administration, and there's sort of additional benefits that come with this, because we develop this dialogue, we get a better working relationship. All those things we sort of don't describe, but they come along with it, and they have value.
and in addition to that, the committee would have to study some of these things. Am I right about that?
Yeah, I think that's fair.
Okay.
Yeah.
Don't you think
Susan?
a perfect example is the Community Engagement Committee and the recommendation to have communications director? So the board didn't have to pass that. But it was a recommendation that came from the committee after significant study for a period of time in terms of needs. Why do you need this? What do you currently have? How does it look? What's it going to do to help us? How's it going to help us meet our goals? The facilities committee, very similar. I mean, they're not going to tell the board you have to build a first grade school on this piece of property. The board will ultimately make that decision. They're to study the issues including community members, and then bring their findings back to us. We still have to make the decision.
So we have to make a decision about what we do, and the idea here is to sort of gather input.
So I made mine a little broader, because we're either gonna address the opportunity gap or we're not, right? You can't, the opportunity gap is more than, let's hope they get 2 points better on a 3-hour test once a year. You have to address academics, you have to address family life, you have to address behavioral policies. We have to, that all has to be in there, or you're not gonna address the achievement gap, and you're just peeing in the wind. So it's just, I mean, that's why I made mine a little bit broader, because you have to address all those things together. And we aren't doing that. And I've said that for 2 years, we haven't been doing that, and we aren't doing it. We need to start doing that, because are we gonna keep getting the results we keep getting, so.
Susan?
Well, that's true, but the committees have limited, I mean,
Right.
when we talked about the reaching out, I think that's where board members can be involved, and community members can be involved. And we talked about ways to try to, we never really came up with some totally workable ideas. We threw around some ideas of how to engage minority parents more, to just taking that one example, bring them into school. So those kinds of things we can do. But a lot of the other things, first of all, for some of this, you're dealing with student privacy issues in terms of their information. You're dealing with, you can't even have information on family. There's a lot of stuff we don't have access to. We know that some of those the issues are there, so it's more a matter, I think, of, I mean, the staff ends up having to do most of the, I mean, not most, but almost all of the major work. So if the committee just focuses And I think we do need to hear more before we even maybe form a committee like that, hear more about what we're doing right now and what the staff sees as our needs. You know, you talk about social workers and all that kind of thing, and I think that's the kind of thing where a committee like that could say, boy, the evidence is that we really, do we have more homeless kids this year? I don't know. Last time I heard was a couple years ago we had 32 or something, which was a lot to make for. So there's a lot of stuff we don't know, and I think if you had a committee, you could kind of get input on what's going on now with student services, with our social workers, with curriculum, and then before we actually shape a charge to an ad hoc committee. I think we need to have more information first.
Well, I think what you can do is you can shape sort of a little more generic charge that allows the committee the freedom to follow the directions within that charge that they develop as time goes on. You're absolutely right. You know, we're kind of shooting in the dark initially, and it would argue against having a too specific focus until you can develop specific goals. And so what we can do is give them a general charge, and then the committee can develop its own goals that fall in line with the charge.
And can I say one more thing?
Yeah.
I'm also a little reluctant to give up on the general committee, because I really do want to hear more. I do want to have more discussions about service delivery and curriculum. I want to have those discussions too. So I don't know, you know, originally I thought, well, maybe the answer is to have a committee and then have an ad hoc from that. But then I thought, I don't know if that's right. It gets too complicated. So maybe we need two. I mean, well, an ad hoc committee usually has a limited charge and is done within a certain amount of time. They don't last forever.
Right.
So if we did have an ad hoc committee to focus on the opportunity gap, after we maybe forming it after we get some input or whatever, they might have a charge to review it and see if there were recommendations, if they think we should be putting more resources into something, for example. And they would, the result might be a report due at the end, and then we could still have this other. I just don't want to give up any other more general committee, I guess.
And
because I feel like we have, you know, we talk a lot about. I mean, because we have a whole lot of other kids that we don't feel like sometimes we know what's going on with them in terms of how much progress we're making, and I think we need to hear more about that too. That's kind of.
I would also point out that we don't have to originate it all tonight, or I mean, we
Well,
can
that's what I was
change.
kinda hoping.
We can add something in October. We can.
Or even the next meeting, if we just from this discussion, then I can think
I'm saying
about
we can go. We have the flexibility to go one way tonight,
Right.
or the next meeting, and then in the future come up with future directions.
I thought we should pull in Equity Alliance. There's a committee on minority hiring, which I think is a waste of time right now. Pull all that stuff together under, because but don't get me wrong, I think we need to focus on minority hiring, but that's like decorating the penthouse before you build the building. Well, there's no reason for them to come here right now. There is, why would they come here, right? We have all kinds of we don't pay as well as hardly anybody. We're in the news, every time we're in the news is because of problems.
Lately, but okay.
Every time, ask somebody in Dade County if they know Monona Grove, they'll say Deerhead, right? We have a bad history, and what have we done to improve that? That's why I think it's important to be part of that. That's gotta be a goal, but I think to focus a committee on there, I think even the committee members think it's a waste of time right now. I think we gotta start building from the ground up. That's why I think we need a committee focused strictly on the opportunity gap.
Achievement gap.
Opportunity gap, I call it.
I call it that too. I think words matter.
I don't think
it's
it's
better. Yeah.
I think we're all agreed on
Okay.
the same thing,
Right.
whatever we
We are.
want to call it.
Right.
Right.
All right.
Gloria Ladson Buildings calls it the education debt, because we're not
Right.
servicing our,
She does not like achievement gap.
right.
Susan?
So I think that's an excellent point, and kind of the thread I'm hearing here that I hadn't really identified as a real concern until just this minute, and that is that what exactly are the plans this year for the Equity Committee and Equity Alliance, and we've actually seen the updated grids, but what's the action plan within that, so that we don't have a committee that is usurping their goals, right?
Yeah, and that's a staff committee. Well, I mean, it's committee members too, but it's, and it'd be worth getting, well, certainly we should be.
I mean,
talking
how
to
would you
Shelby
feel if you're
about-
the staff member and all of a
Yeah.
sudden the ad hoc committee, is doing the exact same thing you've been doing.
Well, that's why I think we gotta
Yeah.
pull it all
Right.
together. It's-
Right.
And so we're all pulling the same direction, not pulling every different direction.
I agree.
And I think it has to be more than board members and staff.
I agree.
It can't be us telling the community how they're gonna do. I mean, we gotta make it, and I think the more, we need to show them, not tell them. Show the community, not tell them that they're welcome, their voice is welcome, they're gonna be heard, we're gonna take action. Because we tell them until we're blue in the face. We have it in our strategic plan, but we aren't following it. So we need to sit down and then hopefully as it goes and as they see, more people will come and will want to be part of it. That's why I didn't want it strictly a committee, because I don't want somebody to sit there and have something to say and, oh, you can't talk because you're not part of the committee. I want everybody's voice to be able to be heard and everybody to understand that their voice is going to be heard.
The committee can set its own rules for who's allowed to come and talk and speak. And I mean, in personnel committee, for example, we have the teachers come in, and any teacher who wants to come in and walk in at certain points of the meeting and talk about what's going on in their day is any issues that happens, and so the committee's free to set their parameters.
Okay.
And
Well,
Nobody else can do that.
Yeah.
You can't have somebody, just a parent or someone come in and be really concerned about us not paying enough teachers. And there's no way.
That's right,
And I
but-
think that's what Jeff is talking about, is that you don't always know who the person is that has some input
Well-
that they wanna make. And how do you provide for that?
Well, like I said, the committee can set those parameters and provide a forum for that. I think that might be a really good use for that, is to provide a forum for this, for discussion about issues. I think if we do that and we're open and mindful, we're gonna hear a lot of things that are gonna open
And then
our eyes and ears.
we don't set agenda then. We come back to the board and the administration say, we've heard this from 20 people. What can we do to fix it? What can we do to address this?
What's the real origin of the problem?
Right. So we
That's the
come in
question
and
you have to ask
partner
first.
with the administration. I mean, like, I know two African-American children that got pulled out of our district because we were not meeting their needs at all, and they didn't feel that anybody wanted to meet their needs. So they just pulled out of the district. We wouldn't know that.
This is a story I've also heard, students open enrolling out of the district.
Right. So that shouldn't happen. We need to find a way to address that and not just be like, oh, they're gone, who knows? Poof.
So then the other question, and I appreciate you bringing up the Equity Alliance, and maybe Andrew has some input on this. How is a group like, is that gonna take away from the community involvement in the Community Engagement Committee? Where the expectation was that they talked about those issues. One of the things I had suggested to Carrie was that you guys talk about To Kill a Mockingbird, and she didn't do that. So is that gonna change how that, how the Community Engagement Committee engages?
Hopefully, yes.
So you say they're gonna deal with all the
Community
issues
Engagement
except for
Committee
equity?
is a broader purpose, so that's this is a piece of it, and I think we could be, one thing the Community Engagement Committee would be, and Shelby did come to those meetings, in fact, Krista did too. They could come in, that could be a focus of a meeting and decide whether.
So maybe like
so
facilities.
It doesn't usurp it, but I think
Like
it's.
facilities where
trying not to get
facilities
this
studied
overwhelmed.
it, but then you brought in the Community Engagement Committee to learn about what that particular issue, so that they could have a
So
discussion
it'd be,
as well.
and so it'd be informed,
Okay.
yeah, that's part of it.
We just, I think, have to be thoughtful about that.
Peter?
Yes, Dean, sorry.
I think that, since I've been on the board, we've had spurts of 45-minute to an hour and 15-minute presentations, and with questions that often extended it and so forth, and then we become unengaged for another 8 or 9 months, that sort of thing. I really think that I was thinking of having the Curriculum and Programs Committee. I think that's probably too broad. I think there seems to be some consensus to narrow it, because we'd be dealing with curriculum and programs anyway, but we could have it more focused. I really think that we could talk this thing to death for another 3 months.
Yes.
I think if you have, if you find 3 people who would be willing to sit down, whether they don't have to be the permanent committee members, but I presume they might be, could sit down and say, here's the kind of things that we want to do, and then I think you could have some of these in-depth discussions with curriculum, with special ed, and and the whole demographics of the kind of thing. We don't hear much about dropout programs, and there's not always just dropouts at high school. There's dropouts elsewhere too. And I think I think that committee could define itself over time. And I think if we're trying to define it ahead of time, we'll never get to doing it. I just think we need to give it a name and an initial task, and get 2 or 3 people who want to deal on it. And I think that ought to be a board committee to begin with. I think we do. I think we ought to stop talking about it and do it.
No. But what I'm trying to do is get some idea of whether or not absolutely we need to move. We want to move quickly, but I'm trying to get some idea about what the focus is. You said yourself that it was too narrow, so that we can, come back with some good directions and get it off the ground relatively quickly. And I think we've got an issue here. The question is, do we want to do a more general program, a more general committee like curriculum and programs, or do we want to do something that focuses more specifically on the opportunity gap questions? And I think if we resolve that, then I'm ready to move ahead with developing
my
a general charge.
resolution of that would be to start with a narrower focus, because it will have a tendency to want to expand anyway. But if you expand, you'll be spending all your time on the big picture of every curricular program at every grade level. So I think that some of the brief discussions I've heard and had with other board members have convinced me to back off on a curriculum and programs committee broadly, and make it much more, I don't know how you want to do it, but the closing the gap or the opportunity gap or something like that. And then that'll be getting into curriculum and other things sooner or later.
Is there a consensus that that's the direction we need to go? Does anybody have a strong objection?
I think it's I'd just like to echo what Dean said and just say if we have it sounds like we do, we're really just talking about what the role and the name of what the committee might be. I mean, it seems like we're all talking about there's a need to look at this opportunity gap, achievement gap, whatever we decide to call it, and have a committee with a little bit more narrow focus.
Okay. That's good. That's good. This is a good discussion. Susan?
Could we set it up as a more general ad hoc committee, but do a charge? So the first charge is to address the opportunity gap, but then I'm just having a hard time letting go of my.
I'm having a hard time too.
So I kind of don't want to give that up.
I have a question. Hang on. No, I think.
Well, I want to, because I want to have those other discussions that we talked about.
Here's what I'm going to
service delivery program, other programming. I don't want to give that up, and I feel like if there's a way to create an ad hoc committee like this, kind of like what I described.
Where you are is where I started too.
Right, but then if we want to not lose focus of this opportunity gap thing, since that's on all our brains right now, that would be the first thing it would tackle.
The committee and the board don't set the agenda of the broader program.
Right, or something. And that's what I was trying to get at here. Not that this is a perfect description.
I think you got to start.
That's right. You got to start. So here's how I want to start. What I want you all to do is, we've had this discussion, is to send me bullet points, like just 4 bullet points here about what the charge of the committee will be. Short statements about what you think the general areas of the charge of the committee will be. I will try and synthesize them and bring them back for next time.
Which committee?
This committee we're talking about, the new committee, which we're going to, we have unofficially titled the
Opportunity gap?
the opportunity, although Susan doesn't want that narrow focus.
I want the teaching and learning and equity. I like that better.
I like teaching, learning, and equity.
And you
too.
can still make it focus on the opportunity.
The name doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll do that. And actually, now I want to hear from Dan.
All right, thank you.
Well, there's a novel idea.
All right, I guess what I would ask you as you consider that.
Yeah.
Okay, you may look at that chart on the wall and say, yeah, we're not really doing anything. I want to make it clear, absolutely we are. And I welcome the opportunity to share the work that we're doing. Okay, your board has to, be a partner with us on this. But every time that we meet, whether it be small groups, admin team, that is always our focus about what are we doing to meet those goals. We live and breathe that every day. And so I think it's a little bit unfair to say we haven't done anything. Okay, and I really take offense to that, when I hear those statements. We have a tremendous amount of staff that are absolutely committed to that work.
I don't think
Okay?
anybody said that.
Oh, sure we have.
I've said that.
And it was stated by.
I agree with you, but that's why I want.
The data doesn't show that, though.
The data is absolutely as hard to move the needle, and by no means are we satisfied.
Right.
But if we're all of a sudden taking leaps and bounds moving that data, okay, I'll be out of here and I'll make my millions. This is a hard thing to do.
Okay. Right.
And so I guess what I want to say, none of us are saying we're solving the problem.
Yeah.
Okay, we absolutely have those challenges, but I also want to recognize the work that is being done.
This is by the.
That's could happen in the committee.
This is why one of the reasons why I believe we need this committee, because we have to facilitate this communication, because there is a disconnect between the board and the things that go on in this district in many areas, in many ways.
And the community too.
And the community, and I just think that this is a really important function of this board, is to facilitate this communication. Of this committee is to facilitate the committee, and it should be the first thing on their charge.
Yeah. And I want to make it clear, I absolutely agree with that. I want to be a partner with the board, not myself, personally, our team, our teachers, everything that we do, we have to be working together on that, and no doubt about it.
And I believe also that the board has to develop working relationships with other administrators. We have better relationships with the rest of your staff. We work with you, we work with Jared regularly. We need to expand that a bit. Part of it is just so we can see all of this stuff that's going on.
Well, yeah, and that was the idea for me of this committee, was because I do believe we're doing a lot of stuff. I talk to teachers, I know what they're doing, sort of, sometimes, but isolated little pieces. And that's why I thought it'd be nice to have where we can really find out more about it, have a better understanding of it, because I think we are doing stuff, and then find out, well, what can we do to maybe support, to move the needle a little further? Is there something we can do? Because we are doing some.
Send me 1 to 4 bullet points each. I will work with Dan to synthesize them into, and I might call you and ask clarification about what you want to do, and see to help me merge them together, being careful to avoid the walking quarrel. But we'll try and synthesize it for Dan, so we can bring this back on our next meeting. Does that work for everybody?
I won't be at the next meeting.
Oh, right.
So just
But we'll have your input.
And the party.
That's right.
Well, since I'm not gonna be at the next meeting, it's fine if you wanna discuss stuff. I don't know if it would be fair to assign committee members if I'm not present.
Well, we won't do it. I won't do that at the meeting. We do that versus, send me emails who wants to do what, and hopefully we'll have a draft.
This is the first step in defining the issue.
Hopefully we'll have a draft out before the next meeting, so people can decide whether or not they want to be on it, but assuming that it goes in the direction of the draft. Okay? You can always back out. You can always say, now that you're doing that, I don't want to be on it, but, okay?
And Peter, I would add, there's lots of times you don't get to be on the committee. Thank you, Peter. I mean, like for 4 years I wanted to be on personnel, and then, I finally got to do that. I don't know if that was plus or minus, but you can always.
It was a plus, Susan.
Yeah, I hope it was. I meant for you, not for me. It was definitely a plus for me. But you can, like the facilities committee, we had no board members on that committee. All you had to do was go and watch. And if this is a committee that we're really, really interested in knowing more about, we might figure out a way to film it so that people can watch what's going on and learn more about what we're doing. That's part of communicating with the board. We'll just talk about it.
Of course, the change of the board means that we will be changing the people on the committees, but I encourage that, moving people around on committees. I think we should all have time, experience with policy and personnel.
I think everybody should have this experience with policy. You will not get an argument from me on that one.
Somebody has to do it.
You really need that
All right.
third person.
I don't know anything about policy.
I think we know where we're going, right?
Yeah.
All right, future meetings. The next Wednesday, we have the board workshop.
When
And
we
the date is the
workshopping?
18th.
And next Wednesday, we have the workshop here at 6. I'm sorry, what's
That's
that?
at 6, right,
Yeah, at 6. It's a facility survey review. Personnel is on the 22nd. This is the 9th. I'll discuss that with current chair. And
Could you
whether or not
repeat that?
what's that?
Could you repeat that?
The personnel committee?
Yeah.
I mean, the membership of the personnel committee will probably change, and it may happen
Okay.
right before that time, but hopefully we'll have some continuity also. Susan, you had an issue.
Oh, no, I was just, wondering, more for the new board members, and it's whatever the board wants, about normally, if you're chairing a committee, you, report out. And we usually, and not regularly, have the liaison to the teacher mentoring group. Just kind of keep us up to date.
We actually haven't, we made a choice not to do that this last year, this one was, because we felt like, and the same with the foundation, we decided not to have this on a regular basis.
What was that?
Well, we didn't ask for reports at every meeting for those, we didn't want them at every meeting, because it got very redundant, and I think we just felt like if there was something to report, then that person should report it, but that was at least what some of us thought, so I'm not agreeing that we
well, I
want it
guess
every
what I'm
meeting.
saying is
Yeah.
if it's not on the agenda, you can't report it out. So let's say they did all the scholarships and they set a date
Well,
and
when something happens, for example, the MGFO, it's time to talk about the gala. Oops. It's time to talk about the gala. Send it to me or Dan, and we'll put it on the
I would
agenda
suggest the
next
folks
meeting.
that are those liaisons, if you wanna report out, let me know, we'll put you on the agenda.
That's right, that's better, because if it's on the agenda every time, they're gonna feel like they have to report every time, and that's where it just gets redundant, you hear the same
I mean,
thing.
Dean has done that.
Right, yeah.
When you were the liaison for the new teacher project, a
Well,
couple times you said.
I was just gonna raise the question,
Yeah.
is it, I
I
think we've passed that around as a good experience
Yeah.
for everybody, and particularly a new school board member. I got my assignment kind of late, so I would recommend that Andrew or Eric be a liaison. It's kind of a,
Actually, Andrew already got.
They are,
fired.
they both
Yeah.
are.
oh, they are?
Yeah.
Yep.
Oh,
Oh, you were here.
And Eric's
is
the
a
foundation.
liaison to the foundation.
Oh, okay.
You asked for it and you said he could do it because he hadn't done it before.
Sure.
I think we just
Okay.
remind them to.
I'm sorry, I missed the meeting.
No, you were here.
No, you were here.
Oh, I was?
Yeah.
I missed it anyway.
Sooner or later, we'll ask for
We
it.
all-
You
we all
should
miss
bring
it.
a report,
It's
but when you have something
checked out.
significant, just add.
Okay.
All right, adjournment.
Yeah, I agree.
Are there any objections to adjournment?
Joyce likes to have a motion, so I'll move we adjourn.
Oh, does she?
A second.
All right, moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Oh,
Nay?
oh,
No.
boy.
I was gonna say roll
Looks like
call.
we're here for a while.
Yeah,
Amazing. The meeting's adjourned. Thank you very much.